Why have so many Americans forgotten that Russia is not our friend? My boomer dad used to rail against the Russians for as long as I could remember, but as soon as Trump and Fox started talking highly of Russia, he started talking about Russia in a completely different way. He literally praised Putin's ability to maintain control, and he'd talk about not hearing bad things about the government in Russia. I was flabbergasted. My father talking about Russia in a positive light. The man that would tell me stories of standing guard at the Berlin Wall in the 70s and again in the 80s. Talking about Russia like they were somehow our friends. Propaganda. That's why so many Americans have forgotten that Russia is not our friend. Propaganda and a narcissist that we somehow allowed to be president is how we got here. I just want to know how we get rid of them and their ideals. These people don't actually support Russia. They don't want to be on the side that the Democrats and mainstream media supports. Nobody watches Rocky IV enough. As a boomer with a similar upbringing, it blows my mind to see Republicans becoming Putin sympathizers. I never thought I'd say that Republicans are too pro-Russia for my tastes. Because Russia runs a massive global propaganda machine that is all over Twitter and YouTube. Russia is also very good at bribing rich politicians in the Republican Party. Specifically, it's conservatives who are developing a Russia-friendly mindset. They're doing so simply because Trump likes Putin and is anti-Ukraine. And lately, conservatives seem to jive with whatever Trump says and does. Social media is a weapon. Because they want their own flavor of populism and will stop at nothing to destroy the liberals. This isn't only happening in USA. Several countries have problems like this. Russia has demonstrated that it's willing to interfere with US elections to assist those who are beneficial. That extends to not just office of president but also Congress. It's a low-key way of receiving election support while maintaining deniability. Don't take Reddit as the best place to gauge. I'm Republican and do not think anything about Russia is good, especially with what is happening in. I could care less about Tucker. I don't think the divide is happening because of pro-Russian people in the States. I think it's because we are always too busy telling others what they believe in based on voting choices and our personal opinions to form a view of what we believe others think. Ever got into a political convo and someone says, "Well, I bet you believe this because you're voted for RRL, but doesn't care if you actually don't believe that. They are convinced you do." Goes both ways. Creates a divide naturally. Republicans nowadays just want to be contrarian. Democrats support Ukraine, so Republicans decide to support Russia. The Republican Party doesn't stand for much outside of "own the libs" nowadays. You seem to not understand that Trump supporters are fervently pro-authoritarianism. Especially the xenophobic far-right kind of authoritarianism. Putin and Trump are cut from the same cloth. Trump is just really dumb at it. And the US founders put a lot more restrictions in place to prevent the kind of rule Putin enjoys. Both Putin and Trump think those restrictions are really bad. So Republicans and Republican voters now also think those restrictions are really bad. There really isn't anything more to it. Russia is alternately our friend and not our friend depending on what is politically expedient at the time. Democrat or Republican. Trump was ridiculed for telling Europe to wean themselves off Russian fuel and to build up their militaries. In 2012, Obama ridiculed Mitt Romney for being too critical of Russia, saying it wasn't the 1980s anymore. It's definitely not just a "Trump likes Russia" thing. First off, being on friendly terms with Russia is not a bad thing. It's better to be friends with your enemy than enemies with your enemy. The US is divided. But that's nothing new, and I doubt Russia has much if anything to do with that. It's important to remember your enemy is still human. I don't see anyone saying Russia are the good guys. Saying anything Russia neutral is taken like some sort of Russia worship. Because Trump told them otherwise. You learned what you learned thanks to this nifty little thing called propaganda. I'm not gonna sit here and defend Russia's actions or their leadership, but every country, including our own, has an agenda to push. And each country is more than capable of utilizing the latest psychological warfare tactics against its own citizens for internal gain. At the end of the day, Russia is a country full of people just like you or me. And for anyone to want bloodshed on either side is just sickening. It's up to civilians in every country to stand up to their governments and denounce the 1% trying to influence the masses into doing their bidding. Politics in the US has gotten more and more polarized in the last few decades. A lot of Republicans get their political ideology by just inversing what the liberals are doing at any given time. So during Russiagate, that's how you got a bunch of Republican support for Russia. Pragmatically, it makes no sense to be against supporting Ukraine. It is literally the optimal proxy war. It is this one-way buffer where Russia can be attacked. Yet all of Europe is safe from retribution. On the other hand, there are significant advantages for Russia if they annex Ukraine. One being a much more defensible border with NATO. If Ukraine were to join NATO, it would be the largest staging ground for a counteroffensive in the history of the alliance. Due to the border length and flat terrain, it would be an unforced error to let Russia annex Ukraine uncontested. And frankly, we aren't even close to parity when it comes to how much we have spent. In other words, keeping Ukraine from the Russians is worth far more than we have spent so far. The Ukrainians have made it clear for the last 2 decades that they do not want to be under Russia's yoke. Read up on the Maidan protests to learn about the last time Russia tried to control Ukraine. They are motivated to fight. They have one of the largest militaries on the continent. It's an incredible opportunity to offload last-gen equipment. And it's an incredible opportunity for the rest of Europe to have the Ukrainians fighting their war for them. Any reasonable person who can look at our own military spending and say, I don't think this should be cut, should equally be able to look at this war and say, this is worth the cost. Because the reason we are spending so much on our military is to be able to fight these fights, to block our adversaries from strengthening their hand, and to maintain American economic and military superiority. And the war in Ukraine checks all those boxes. But there's a Democrat in office, so Ukraine bad, Russia good. I mean, we gave the Mujahideen weapons to fight off the Soviets, and look how that worked out. But we check every box for a good proxy war in Ukraine, and half the Senate wants to pull support? The downside of being far away from any real threat. It's great to be this safe, but the tendency is to forget about the threat. It's not about Russia. It's about fascism and dictatorship. And Putin regime is the government they want. We haven't forgotten. One political party has lost its way and understanding of what it means to be an American. They favor power over country. Traitors all the way down.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Eracast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.